In three, two, one. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Real Time Talk with Eagle 3D Streaming. I'm Quentin Anderson, and today's guest is Shellie Baxter. She is the founding CEO of Our Genetic Legacy, which is a groundbreaking nonprofit focused on creating a global platform to share BIPOC history through the We the People Museum. Harnessing the power of genomics and drone technology, Shellie works to uncover and preserve the rich heritage of marginalized communities with a special emphasis on Black, Indigenous, and people of color, also known as BIPOC, narratives. Driven by her passion for social justice and transforming how history is taught, Shellie uses cutting edge technologies to fill in gaps in historical records and restore the voices of marginalized groups. By combining genomics and drone technology, she has revolutionized the field of historical research and education, particularly in engaging young people in this work. Shellie, I am so excited to have you on the show today. How are you doing?
I am well. Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Yes, absolutely. And thank you for taking time out of your busy schedule to be with us today. The first thing I'd like to dive in is just a little bit more about your story, the genomics, the drone technology. And so I'd be very curious to kind of understand how you got to where you are today.
So I started out, I've been a genetic genealogist for a little over 20 years. And so for those who don't know, those ancestry DNA tests that everyone is taking, learning how to really interpret that data for people of color, because the commercials make it seem like, oh, you spit the tube, you send it out, it comes back. You open the email, the lights dim, the music plays, and there's your whole story. Well, when your ancestors were counted as property up until 1865, it's a little different in terms of how to make those connections and how to fill in those gaps. And so I wanted to. Both of my girls were gone to college. My youngest was on her way to UCLA, where my oldest already was. I was like, okay, so what am I going to do? Been a stay-at-home mom all this time and trying to figure out a way to leverage what I already loved to do, which was the genealogy, but really wanting to help people of color. And genetic genealogy, you can make really good money doing that work, but the people who I wanted to help weren't going to be spending that kind of money on genealogy.
Hmm.
And so that led me to develop this nonprofit, Our Genetic Legacy, where I would teach people how to do their own research, because it's too much work for any one individual to do, on this discounted basis. But what I can do is teach you how to do it for yourselves. And so started doing classes on that. Um, and then that led me to the drones, just incidentally, because there was a period in the genetic genealogy world where the DNA started being used for criminal investigations.
Hmm.
And there was no regulation, and I just needed to have an understanding of what I'm asking people to give me at the time that they give it. So I kind of was backing away from the DNA for a little while they were figuring that out. And then I was like, okay, what else is missing when we're trying to do this research? And it was not knowing where your ancestors are buried. And so I was like, okay, I'll get a drone and I'll start mapping, burial grounds all over the United States to, kind of do these virtual tours of these burial grounds to help people with their research. At that time, I really thought drones were a toy. So it was like, not a big, leap when I was thinking about it, or a big commitment in terms of, industry. It was just like, oh, I'll go to Radio Shack and, $300-400, I'll get the good one. And, and then I'll be ready to go, because I'm thinking of it as a toy. And as I start doing my research, realize like, oh wow, this is a thing. Like, you really have to learn. It was a huge industry that I just had no idea. But because my motivator was to be able to tell these stories, I had to figure it out. And so I watched videos online for 48 hours on YouTube and found some different apps to quiz myself. And then I went and took the test and I passed, and I had never touched a drone. So then I still had to save up for the drone because that was like $2,500 for the one that I wanted. Did that and then was able to go down to Alabama because that's where my mother's family is from. And so I wanted to go there and map some of those cemeteries because I had done research in those towns before, in the courthouses and different things, and found information. So I was like, that just made sense to go back to. When I get there, I realized that the terrain in Alabama is a lot different than it is in California. And because I was self-taught at that time, my mission planning was like, consisted of get my license, get a drone, and get a plane ticket. Like that was um, the plan. And then getting there and realize like, oh my God, look at all these trees. Where did they come from? I wasn't anticipating that. But even more so, being able to see in the trees and seeing headstones in those trees. So even in maintained cemeteries, there were perimeters that weren't maintained, and you could literally see headstones out there. And
Oh,
so that's what really inspired me. Like, those are the stories I want to tell
hmm.
of those people who like are truly lost and have been forgotten. That led me to realize I needed a bigger drone. I needed a LiDAR enhanced drone. I couldn't do that with my Mavic 2. So came home, DNA had kind of settled down. So I went back to DNA while I continued to revamp the drone project. And it has now grown into a program that we train Black and brown girls to become FAA certified drone pilots, age 14 to 24. And then we travel the world studying the transatlantic slave trade. And we chose that because enslaved labor has been a factor in the building of every single continent in the world. And so when we start to understand just how deep it goes, then we can really look at that history. And it's important when we're doing our genealogical research and our family tree research is that we understand the history and the context of the time that it happened. So if I'm looking at an 1860 census or 1870 census, I need to know what was going on at that time in order to understand, the information that I'm getting and how much information is even available. So in 1860, I'm odds are I'm not going to find any of my relatives on a census because they were Black and they were listed on the non-population, the slave census, and they were only listed by gender, age. That's it. There are no names. But in 1870, now we have names. So now you're trying to connect those two things. But if I'm looking in 1860 for a name and I don't find it, I'm like, I have to understand what was happening at that time. And so it just really led us into a further investigation of history and how history is being told, what we're taught, what we're not taught. And then that grew into this museum because the work doesn't work if we keep it to ourselves, if we don't put it in a, place where it can be globally accessible. And so that's when we created our virtual museum, which is We the People Museum. And we were talking earlier, and it's a common thing where people are like, where is the museum? Because visually it looks like it's in San Diego. When you look at it online, it looks like it's right here off of Market Street, in Encanto in San Diego. So I'm like, well, what it is like, no, it's 100% virtual. But it is visually, it's based here in San Diego. And that's because it's my hometown. It's where I'm from. So it just made sense to center it where it started.
Yeah, and to kind of to connect the dots for me, so we started doing the drone aerial overviews in Alabama, and then that kind of transitioned into providing young women the opportunity to get a license to fly a drone because that is a thing. You do have to have a license, which I just learned from you. Um, and how are you interweaving that with the message of our genetic legacy and the mission and the purpose of that? And I believe you mentioned you're traveling all over the world and you're doing certain scans of or what? Yeah, how do you kind of combine drones with achieving the message?
So when we're talking about the history and understanding the root of a lot of this history, we have to go back to Africa. Like
Mm,
there's just no way that you cannot.
mm,
Um, and so initially we started off here in San Diego because a lot of times in California, it's disassociated with the slave trade because it's California. We were a free state, so we didn't, participate in it per se. But when we start looking at the history and then also looking, just at the development on the land of, the indigenous people that were here before, and really started to understand some of those backstories, and then going further, and then decided, like, you know what, let's go to Africa and do that research and do that same level of investigation. So last November, took a team of 19, 13 girls. Five of them were licensed pilots. The others were through a partnership with another program who wanted to provide the opportunity so that they could see how we were using STEAM in history.
mm.
That's with the fancy detour. I spent 2 weeks in Ghana with two of my staff members. We had 16 Ghanaian girls that we worked with for that whole 2 weeks. So their schools released them to us for that 2 weeks. The first week we went over, drone technology, kind of intro to drones, but also starting to expose them to history and museums. One of the things I didn't realize in going, I just assumed that they were going to be teaching us about African history because they, were native and lived in Africa.
Hmm.
And come to find out that even in Africa, they don't teach pre-colonial history.
Hmm.
So these girls had never, only one had ever been to a museum in her whole life.
Oh, wow.
None of them had been to any of the heritage sites ever. The slave castles and the different in the space, the Asin Mansa where we were mapping. So when my girls from San Diego came for that second week, they all experienced all of that together.
Hmm.
And so that was just a really amazing thing to see. One, just how like girls are just girls, how they just blended together. It was two different schools from in Ghana. It was two different organizations in San Diego. All four lived in the dorms, and we had no issues the entire time. And at the end, when it's time for the Ghanaian girls to go back because they went back the day before we left, they're crying. Everybody's in full boo-hoo. Like, we still have an Instagram group where
Oh, cool.
all still talk and connect, and just to hear the takeaway from that from the girls, like, it's everything. And so when we're talking about the mission of our genetic legacy, the purpose is to restore the legacy of people of color. And not only have we been robbed of our family stories, but we've also been robbed of access to resources. So by providing this drone training and this access to high earning careers, we're also bridging that gap, and filling in some of those spaces to provide these high level resources to Black and brown young women at a younger age to make them more competitive in the market.
Very awesome. And so your team comes back to San Diego, and I imagine you probably have troves of data. So what happened next? What did your team decide to do with all the scans?
So there's two things. So we actually don't have as many scans as we could, and a lot of that has to do with when traveling internationally. Our LiDAR drone, we call her Big Bertha.
Hmm.
Government name is Eagle One,
Hmm.
but she's a big drone, and I'm not comfortable with her in the belly of a plane. So like she needs her own seat. And then her battery pack, which is a whole suitcase that charges, it needs its own thing, but because the number of batteries and them being lithium. So all this to say that we're not able to do the LiDAR mapping when we go international.
Hmm.
We're able to do that locally. So when we go international, the girls create a lot of footage that they use for their projects, for their exhibits, for the museums. And then we do a 3D modeling mapping for photogrammetry of the actual site to be able to use that in the museum. Our goal is to get to the point to where we have LiDAR enhanced drone that we can travel with or that we're able to actually rent. Because we looked at renting one in Ghana, and the cost was so ridiculous. It just didn't make sense to do.
Hmm.
We're actually going to Nigeria this November.
Oh, wow.
Um, Similar, same type of situation. We're taking this time. I'm only taking 5 girls as part of my workforce development program, the Pathways to Careers. They are training to become interns of the organization. So they're all 19 to 24, and 5 of them will be going over. We'll be over there for a week. We'll work with 5 Ghanaian high school girls, and we'll be doing the mapping and the researching, going to the museums and the studying while we're there for that time. And we're also have added another program because, when there's just not enough to do. I went for the pre-trip in August, and I went to an area called Makoko Village. It's actually half on water and half on land. And I didn't get a chance to finish all of my research before I went because I was going to research on the plane, and Delta's Wi-Fi, international Wi-Fi was out.
Hmm.
So anyway, still go like, okay, well, I'll do the tour now and then I'll finish my research when I get back home, and not realizing that it's actually classified as a slum. So
Hmm.
in going there, really feeling like I wanted to do something to be able to help these people, but what makes sense for me to do,
Right.
because they're literally living in sewage. So it's half on water, and went out on the canoe to tour the area. Like other people call it, like the Venice of Africa, um, one of their nicknames. But it's just the water is so polluted, and they're not knowing like, what can I actually do? Like I don't have the resources to, provide enough food to make a dent. So what can I do for the children? What can I do for the education? First thought was, I know there's too many students. There's over 3,000 students in Makoko. I wouldn't be satisfied, like, bringing, 100 backpacks, and then you have all these other kids who don't get anything. So then it was like, oh, I know, I'll do something for the teachers, do like a care thing for the teachers. There's like 300 to 500 teachers. Okay, I can't quite pull that one off either. And it came to me a little over a week ago that, oh, I can bring the museum to the schools to be able to use as an educational tool. Then that will be a benefit to all of the students. And and it makes sense for what I'm trying to, present this museum as being. So we're in the process of, there's, I think, approximately 30 to 40 schools in Makoko Village. They're doing a sign up in order to participate in a 1-year program. We'll bring them, each school will get 1 laptop, and we'll give them internet access. Every month we'll have online meetings, a 45-minute meeting where they discuss curriculum. We teach them how to use the museum to engage and to reinforce the curriculum they're already teaching. And also giving them digital literacy skills in terms of how to be able to, even use the computer. So we're really excited about how that has developed, and that's next steps.
And that virtual museum is very, very interesting because it's sort of the focal point or the nexus where we have all this information, and then it's access similar to a museum. There's exhibits, and ways to dive into history, into heritage. And if you ever feel like, or if you have a visual and you'd like to screen share, please feel free to do so. I am super curious. So you built this virtual museum, in Unreal Engine. How did you find out about Unreal Engine? How did you decide? Did you build this museum yourself? Um,
So here's the beauty of partnerships. Um, my lane is the history, the genealogy, the telling of the stories. I had reached out to, actually getting the physical, the virtual physical, you know, museum built. I had no skills in being able to do. An architect reached out to me, Joshua Foster in Los Angeles, he reached out, we were talking about it, and I was like, he was really excited about the project. And I was like, listen, here's what I need. Can you do it? Because I don't even know what I'm asking at this point. Um, he says, yeah, we'll get it done. He puts together a team with two other Black architects out of Los Angeles, three Black men, worked together, and they built the museum based on a couple of Zoom calls, just telling them, what I was looking at, and they, what I was looking for. And then they took their interpretation of that and they built the museum for us, which, is wild, like not even knowing what I was asking for at the time. And here we are 2 years later, and they're still working on it. I don't know if they knew this was going to be a lifetime project, but
Mm,
they're stuck with me.
mm.
So they built the museum for me. And last year, when we debuted the museum, the goal was to have it online. We were using Inkscape at that time. But because of the file size and everything else, it was too clunky for, the metaverse. So it would just lived on the laptop. I would do in-person demos of it. Then just this past June, I was in Kenya for a drone convention. I was on a panel, and there was a guy there who was talking about, he had this a corporation that he had co-founded, Arrow AI. Um, and he was talking about, different gaming and using Google Earth. And I was like, wait, hold on. So, so I'm telling him about the museum. At that point, it's still between Rhino and Inkscape, where it's currently living. And I'm telling him what I want. I want to put it in, Google Earth. I want it to look like it's in San Diego and da 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 da. And he's like, yeah, no, we already, integrate that with the platforms that they were using. And it was like, wait, hold on. I had to go get my laptop. Like, no, can you do this? Because other people had said they could do it and it didn't work. Um, so he looked at it, he's like, yeah. So all of that, bringing me to Eagle, all of the platform, all of that comes from Arrow AI. Turns out that, I meet him in Kenya. He's a Nigerian man, but he lives in his businesses in Las Vegas.
Yeah.
Being here in California, that's right up the street. And we've been, he was the one who worked with the architects to streamline the museum to be able to get online, and then had his team to continue to fine tune it, and then using Eagle in order to actually stream it, because that allowed us to maintain the image quality.
Yeah, and I'd love to take a peek. If you've got something that is shareable,
Uh,
and
Let me go to share screen. So this is our museum. Now, what I love about the platforms that we're using, so this is where you can see its location in San Diego. So this is using actual Google Earth.
very cool.
And it's set right there. We put it in a canyon that no building exists, so it wouldn't be weird. Like,
All right.
so it's already a little weird, but not too far. So we can go up and then we go back in. And then we get to like my favorite thing to do is, let me go up a little bit more. You can drop your avatar down, and she like falls through the sky. It's just
Oh, cool.
exciting for me.
Hmm.
So now she goes up to the museum. First, I'm going to go into this exhibit, and then I'm going to show you some other things about it. And we're still fine tuning and developing. So these are our exhibits from the past 2 years. So our very first year, we did the Nate Harrison Serenity Ranch, which is home of Nate Harrison, the first Black landowner. So this are images and information about his exhibit. We also put a 3D horse in there and a buggy, because those were common modes of transportation that he dealt with. And there's like a little wooden person. I'm not sure she's supposed to be there. But
All right.
now I will take you to the front door.
So And just to make sure that I understood, so you initially worked with architects who designed the space, and then you hooked up with Aero AI, and they were the ones that kind of helped get it into Unreal Engine.
Yes.
Cool.
Yeah, like all of that, like they were able to, we haven't even finished all the things that we're going to be putting in there, but like all the things I was dreaming about that, like, oh, what if we made the avatars look like the girls? He's like, oh, we can do that. Like, oh, what if they talked? Oh, they can do that. Like, so we are really in our infancy. Like I say, I just met him at the end of June, early July. So this has
Hmm.
only been in the past 3 months of work. So like you can talk to her, you can ask questions. She'll give you directions and background. And as you walk through,
Oh, there's a drone.
yep, you have the drones is randomly flying around because they are such a core of what we do. Um, and a lot of the design is exactly like you would expect from a real museum. And then right out here outside, part of this is going to become a drone training ground.
Hmm.
And so we're going to integrate how to, do drone flight simulations, and they'll be able to go around there. So there's lots of, different aspects of the museum. It is available online for everyone. When you go up here to save locations, we're in the process, we're going to update that to say museum directory. But currently, like you can go directly into spaces. So that way, if you don't know
Oh,
how to
cool.
get there, you can go directly into them. This shows our vlog that we,
Hey, so it's day two in London.
Oh, cool.
and so like there's actual audio. This is from our founders room. So these are the very first girls who were in the program from a photo shoot we did. And then we have a video here that we got from Shirley Weber, who's our California Secretary of State, congratulating them. When we're talking about exhibits, so when we went to Ghana, one of the things that we had the girls do after they completed all of the research, their closing project was to create a letter to their ancestor based on, what they had learned, what their reaction, and this is the room where those letters are. So many of them are actual videos. So just like that other video opened up, you can go in, and when you click on it, it'll open up the videos of the different girls based on their, understanding and the impact
Right.
that we did there.
Now, and then you had mentioned that this is online. So how did you did the team have to kind of explain what pixel streaming was, or what are your thoughts on pixel streaming?
No, I mean they did, but in a very high level, way, because my focus was, can we put the exhibits in there? Can it be accessible? Like, will it do this? Will it do that? Versus, I was more focused on the functionality than the how.
Hmm.
And so they were like, this is the way to go. Yes, it'll do this. Yes, it'll do that. And so beyond that, I know nothing. I just know like how to log into it, the fact that it is working, and it has turned out to, for us to be able to maintain the integrity of the museum, because I didn't want the museum to become like a comic book type
Hmm.
um, visual, because this is real history. And so we really wanted to, maintain that balance between the impossible and the possible.
Hmm.
Discuss the history.
And so, was the pixel streaming, was it helpful in preserving the authenticity or making sure that it's high fidelity as opposed to, were you always planning on having this a web-based experience?
It was
Or,
always, the plan was always to be web-based because I wanted to be globally accessible,
mm,
because we do travel internationally. We want those students that we work with, all over, to be able to have access. And especially after going to Ghana and finding out that they don't learn anything about pre-colonial history the way that, you would make assumptions. And so it's really a universal issue. in terms of how history is being taught and so many times not being taught. Even going to Nigeria, we're finding out that many of the schools don't teach history at all. And so then teaching the teachers there how to integrate the lessons that they're already doing into the museum as history, whether, be the ABCs, like go in and find 3 things in the museum that start with the letter A. Like it doesn't have to be, overly complicated, but just to engage students with the possibilities of life in the outside world.
Absolutely. And we are very excited and frankly flattered to be a part of this project and helping to serve the mission. And we're glad that, and so I guess is the idea that everyone, when you go back over to Africa, they'll be able to access it through the internet and to interact with the virtual museum. Very cool.
Yeah, and we update the museum every year. So just like the first year, we just had our first 2 exhibits from Julian and Harrison Serenity Ranch. Last year, we went to Ghana, the United Kingdom, and Portugal. So we included those exhibits. We released this past September. Next year, we will be releasing our Nigeria, Brazil, Veracruz, Jamaica, Norfolk, Virginia, Louisiana, and Allensworth. So we have 7 new exhibits coming next year because, why just do 3 or 4 when you can do 7?
Absolutely, yeah, and we will keep an eye out for the new releases. Is there a way for us to stay connected with you, or what's the best way? Are the updates published on the website, or how best to stay in touch?
The best way is to follow on social media, Instagram, LinkedIn, Facebook, at Our Genetic Legacy
Okay,
is our social media. And then we have our website, ourgeneticlegacy.org. But through our social media is probably the most, interactive to get like a constant update. We post when the girls pass their licensing test, when we, go on trips and the inspiration for like the exhibit. So that kind of gives you the behind the scenes look into the organization that you don't necessarily get from the website.
perfect. Well, Shellie, thank you again so much for swinging by to share your story and your project. Thank you, everyone, for watching today's show. I'm Quentin Anderson. This has been Real Time Talk with Eagle 3D Streaming, and we'll catch you on the next show. Thanks again, everyone. Bye.